What is a carrier? Rethinking physical persistence. 1. What does it mean to carry persistence? Physics has long sought to describe how physical systems evolve. Whether through classical mechanics, general relativity, or quantum theory, the emphasis has largely been placed upon the laws governing change. Less often considered, however, is the more fundamental question of what carries physical persistence through that change. Traditionally, this role has been attributed to time. Whether understood as something that flows or simply as the parameter by which physical states are ordered, time has generally been treated, either explicitly or implicitly, as the medium through which physical persistence is realized. This essay develops a different perspective. Rather than treating time as the carrier of persistence, it proposes that time serves only as the ordering parameter by which persistence is indexed. If time is not itself the carrier, a more fundamental question immediately follows. What carries physical persistence? To answer that question, we must first ask what it means for anything to function as a carrier. Within this essay, persistence is defined as the continued existence of an organizational structure, despite changes to its organization. A carrier is that through which a persistent structure is able to persist, despite continual changes to its organization. Once what fulfills the role of the carrier has been identified, a conceptual hierarchy emerges. A principle follows naturally from the role it performs. From that principle follows a corresponding law governing its evolution, and from that law follows the mechanism through which it is realized. Together, these form a simple framework that can be applied wherever persistence is realized through an identifiable structure. To develop this framework, it is useful to begin with biology, where the concept of a carrier is already well established. Once this hierarchy has been illustrated in that familiar setting, the same reasoning can be applied to physical persistence. 2. The hereditary carrier. The concept of a carrier is perhaps most familiar in biology. Biological evolution concerns hereditary persistence across successive generations, yet individual organisms do not themselves persist across that entire process. If hereditary persistence is maintained, then some persistent organizational structure must carry that persistence from one generation to the next. Within this framework, that structure is the genome. The genome is therefore identified as the hereditary carrier because it fulfills the role through which hereditary structure is able to persist, despite continual changes to its organization. Mutation, recombination, inheritance, genetic drift, and natural selection all alter the organization of the genome, yet the genome continues to function as the hereditary carrier throughout those changes. Once the carrier has been identified, a corresponding principle follows naturally. The genome is the hereditary carrier. From this principle, a corresponding law also follows. Because hereditary persistence is realized through the organization of the genome, the evolution of the genome depends upon the hereditary history of its present organization. Its present organization is not an isolated state, but the consequence of preceding hereditary organization from which future hereditary organization develops. The biological mechanisms through which this law is realized are well established. Mutation introduces variation. Recombination reorganizes hereditary information. Inheritance transmits genomic organization across generations, while genetic drift and natural selection continually reshape that organization. Together, these processes modify the organization of the genome while preserving its role as the hereditary carrier. The significance of this hierarchy is not that it introduces a new interpretation of biology. Rather, it demonstrates a general organizational relationship. Once a carrier has been identified, the corresponding principle, law, and mechanism follow naturally from the role that carrier performs. The hierarchy therefore provides a general organizational framework rather than a domain-specific biological theory. The natural question is whether physical persistence admits the same organizational description. 3. The physical carrier. Physics, like biology, concerns persistence. Traditionally, however, that persistence has been understood through time. If time is instead regarded as the ordering parameter by which persistence is indexed, then the question of what actually carries physical persistence remains unanswered. The present framework proposes that physical persistence is realized through the integrated geometric structure of the spatial manifold. hereafter referred to as the integrated geometric carrier. Within this framework, the integrated geometric carrier performs for physical persistence the organizational role that the genome performs for hereditary persistence. The integrated geometric carrier is therefore identified as the physical carrier because it fulfills the role through which physical structure is able to persist despite continual changes to its geometric organization. As with the biological example, identifying the carrier naturally implies a corresponding principle. The integrated geometric carrier is the physical carrier. From this principle follows a corresponding law. Because physical persistence is realized through the organization of the integrated geometric carrier, its evolution depends upon the geometric history of its present organization. The present organization of the carrier is therefore understood not as an isolated geometric configuration, but as one that has developed through preceding geometric organization and, in turn, contributes to future geometric evolution. The proposed mechanism differs from biology, but follows the same organizational hierarchy. The evolution of the integrated geometric carrier is realized through the spatial manifold, together with its modified affine connection within the Poincaré gauge formulation. Within this formulation, contorsion encodes how torsion modifies the affine connection, allowing both curvature and torsion to participate in the organization of the integrated geometric carrier while preserving its persistence throughout geometric evolution. The parallel with biology is organizational rather than mechanistic. In biology, the genome functions as the hereditary carrier. Within the present framework, the integrated geometric carrier functions as the physical carrier. Although the mechanisms differ, the same conceptual hierarchy applies in both domains. Identify the carrier, recognize the principle that defines its role, state the law governing its evolution, and describe the mechanism through which that law is realized. Having established this organizational framework, the remainder of this essay develops the physical implications of identifying the integrated geometric carrier. It examines the structure of the carrier itself, why its role naturally implies history-dependent evolution, and how the proposed law may ultimately be expressed within an appropriate mathematical framework. 4. Expanding the physical carrier. Identifying the integrated geometric carrier establishes the organizational framework, but it also raises a deeper question. What constitutes the carrier itself, and why should its role imply a history-dependent evolution? Within the present framework, the carrier is not identified with the manifold alone, nor with curvature, torsion, or the affine connection individually. Rather, it is the integrated geometric structure of the spatial manifold as a whole. The manifold provides the geometric arena within which physical persistence is realized, while the affine connection describes how that organization evolves. Within the Poincaré gauge formulation, contorsion encodes how torsion modifies the affine connection, allowing curvature and torsion to participate together in the organization of the carrier. These structures are therefore not independent components of the proposal, but complementary aspects of a single persistent geometric organization. This interpretation naturally implies history dependence. If persistence is realized through the organization of the carrier, then its present organization cannot be independent of its preceding organization. Just as the present organization of the genome reflects its hereditary history, the present organization of the integrated geometric carrier reflects its geometric history. The proposed evolution law therefore follows directly from the role assigned to the carrier itself. Physical evolution is understood as the continued reorganization of a persistent geometric structure rather than as a succession of independent geometric configurations. This interpretation does not replace existing geometric concepts. Curvature, torsion, contortion, and the affine connection retain their established mathematical meanings. What changes is their organizational role within the framework. Rather than merely describing geometry, they become participants in the mechanism through which physical persistence is realized. 5. Mathematical development. The organizational framework developed in the preceding sections is conceptually complete. The remaining task is not to establish a new physical law, but to identify an appropriate mathematical formulation of the law already proposed. Riemann-Cartan geometry provides a natural mathematical setting because it accommodates both curvature and torsion within a unified geometric framework. Within this setting, the modified affine connection provides the mathematical structure through which the organization of the integrated geometric carrier evolves, while contorsion expresses the contribution of torsion to that evolution. Together, these provide the mathematical language required by the proposed physical mechanism. Hamiltonian geometrodynamics provides a corresponding description of geometric evolution. Rather than treating successive geometric configurations as isolated states, it offers a framework within which the evolution of the carrier may be described as a continuous geometric process. Within the present proposal, however, that evolution must satisfy an additional requirement. It must reflect the geometric history of the carrier's present organization as required by the evolution law established earlier. The mathematical challenge is therefore to determine the formal condition capable of expressing that history dependence. One possible direction is geometric hysteresis, in which geometric evolution depends not only upon the present configuration of the carrier, but also upon the organizational history through which that configuration has emerged. Whether geometric hysteresis ultimately proves to be the appropriate mathematical characterization remains an open question. More generally, the task is to identify the mathematical condition that allows the proposed history-dependent evolution law to be expressed consistently within the underlying geometric framework. The distinction is therefore between the physical proposal and its mathematical implementation. The physical proposal identifies the carrier, states the principle defining its role, establishes the corresponding evolution law, and describes the mechanism through which that law is realized. The mathematical task is to express those proposals within an appropriate formal framework. 6. Conclusion. This essay has proposed a general organizational framework for understanding persistence through the concept of a carrier. Rather than beginning with time, it first asked what it means for anything to carry persistence. From that question emerged a simple conceptual hierarchy. Identify the carrier, recognize the principle defining its role, state the law governing its evolution, and describe the mechanism through which that law is realized. Biological evolution provides a familiar illustration of this hierarchy. The genome functions as the hereditary carrier because it fulfills the role through which hereditary structure is able to persist despite continual changes to its organization. Consequently, the evolution of the genome depends upon the hereditary history of its present organization, with mutation, recombination, inheritance, genetic drift, and natural selection providing the mechanisms through which that evolution occurs. Applying the same organizational framework to physics leads to a corresponding proposal. The integrated geometric carrier is identified as fulfilling the role through which physical structure is able to persist despite continual changes to its geometric organization. Consequently, the evolution of the integrated geometric carrier is proposed to depend upon the geometric history of its present organization, with the spatial manifold, modified affine connection, curvature, torsion, and contortion together, providing the mechanism through which that evolution is realized. The mathematical development follows naturally from this proposal. Riemann-Cartan geometry provides the appropriate geometric setting, while Hamiltonian geometrodynamics provides a framework for describing the evolution of the carrier. The remaining task is to identify the mathematical condition capable of expressing the proposed history dependence, with geometric hysteresis representing one possible candidate for that role. Viewed in this way, the framework does not reject existing physics, but offers a different organizational interpretation of it. Time is not removed from the description of nature, nor is its importance diminished. Rather, if physical persistence is realized through the integrated geometric carrier, then time need not itself function as the carrier of persistence. Instead, it serves as the ordering parameter by which the evolution of the carrier is indexed. The central proposal is therefore a shift in perspective rather than a rejection of established theory. In biology, persistence is carried by the genome. Within the present framework, physical persistence is carried by the integrated geometric structure of the spatial manifold. The mathematical description of that carrier may continue to evolve, but the organizational framework proposed here remains independent of its eventual mathematical formulation. The motivating question therefore remains the same. If time is only the ordering parameter, What carries physical persistence?